IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Suman, your host for today. In public policy, we deal with interventions of the government in markets and societies. The case for government intervention is high when there exists market failures. So, what are these market failures and how can we understand them better? Our students through the GCPP and the PGP courses study this extensively. To understand this with a real life example, I have with me students from the PGP cohort, Kannan and Deepali, who have analyzed the pharma sector through this lens of market failure. So let's hear from them specifically about the pharmaceutical sector and what they think are failures or what are the possible solutions. Hi, Deepali. Hi, Kannan. Let's begin with a short introduction for both of you. Could you just introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Hi, good morning. I'm Deepali, and I'm a public health professional, and I currently work with National Health Authority under their flagship scheme, ABDM, that is Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, where we aim to develop the backbone for digital health infrastructure of India. And I'm delighted for the opportunity to engage in conversation on this podcast.
Welcome, Deepali. It will be great to hear from you. Kannan?
Hi, Suman. Thanks for this opportunity. I have a background in business management and marketing. So I've worked all my life in consumer product companies, and I've always harbored an interest in public policy and the area of public governance, etc. And which is why I thought, I'll take up this particular course. And as part of that, we are doing the sectoral analysis in pharma, and that opened our eyes up to a lot of things which we till then did not observe about the pharma industry. So I'm happy to be here to share our experience of analyzing this sector. Thanks.
Great. I'm happy to have both of you on this show. Let's begin with why did you choose this particular sector? Like what are the specific features of this sector, or what is it that got you interested in this? Either of you can start.
So I would like to take it further. So, being a healthcare professional, I really wanted to go into the specificities related to this particular sector only. So, in the realm of healthcare, basically, why we decided to venture into the pharmaceutical sector, there are a multitude of reasons. When we talk about the Indian pharmaceutical industry, it is something that's really worth delving into, as it holds this massive position in the global economy. Like it ranks third in volume and 14th in value worldwide. And but what really blew my mind before choosing this sector was how it stepped up during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, during a nationwide lockdown, the industry did not skip a beat. It ensured that a steady supply of medicines as well as vaccines, even when everything else seemed to be at a standstill. For example, they played a crucial role in vaccinating more than 2 billion people in India. And they also sent more than, I think, 290 million vaccine doses to more than 100 countries through their initiative, which is the Vaccine Metri initiative. So it's just mind blowing for me, isn't it?
True. Yeah. I
And if I may add on, another reason why we chose the sector is also, one is, of course, what Dipali just told us. The other is also my prior experience with this sector, in a cursory manner. So, from my B school days where I had done a very detailed project on Ranbaxy and the pharma industry, etc., to my, my last employment happened to be with a consumer healthcare giant, and which had a very deep, presence in pharma. And a couple of things hit me while I was working and while I was exposed to it from the periphery. Of course, we were in the consumer business, but I was quite exposed to what the nuances of the pharma industry are from the periphery. The legal complications, the patent complications aside, there were a lot of there are a lot of interdependencies with policies and government actions. And that really fascinated me because on one end, on the outside, you keep hearing that pharma is a sunrise sector, and there's a lot of bullish and positive news. But on the inside, I could hear, a not so positive outlook, and often, complaining whether it's the supply chain guys, whether it's the R&D guys. Uh, you know, uh, if you kind of observe the organization with a view from the outside, almost every department was concerned and not so positive. So that intrigued me, and that's something that I brought to the table as well here. And that's why we got working on, okay, fine, we'll dig deeper into the pharma industry. That's how we got here.
Yeah, and also as public policy, analysts, I think all through we've been trying to say that health for all is important, and like when you're talking of out of pocket expenses, drugs or pharmas make drugs make a huge component of this out of pocket expenses. Now that's where the issues of accessibility, issues of quality, issues of price, all of that comes into play. So, which is why it is important to look at it from a government, what can the government do kind of thing. Before we go into what can the government do itself, you have analyzed the sector in terms of what are the particular market failures it has. So, let's go over what are these specific market failures, and then we'll come to probable solutions to this. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, when we analyze the sector, we have examined three key policy areas. And even now, we're going deep into those three policy areas and the market failures that are associated with them. So, one is price controls, another is quality standards and regulatory system, and the last one is export and investment promotion. So, now, usually what happens is,
Okay, should I?
yeah, Karan, please.
Uh, okay, so I mean, before we get into the market failures themselves, I think it's important to just give an overview of the Indian pharma sector. And as I mentioned, we've always heard that it's a very high potential sector. It's a sunrise industry, and it's a large export oriented sector, etc. All that is true. I mean, Indian pharma happens to be called the pharmacy of the world. It's third largest in volume and 14th largest in value globally, and it contributes to about 1.32% of our own GDP. Now, unlike any other industry, it's highly export oriented. Just 50% of its produce is for domestic, while the rest is for export. Now, the market structure itself, it's a highly fragmented market, right? So there are about 3,000 companies with about 10,000 plus manufacturing units. It's as big as that, but there are a few large companies that account for about 60% of domestic and 80% of exports. I mean, those are just the large 24 large companies, and even the leader has a 8% share. So it's more or less like a fragmented market, but with a kind of a three-tier structure with the large companies doing drug origination, generic production, etc. Mid-tier is also into branded generics and contract manufacturing, while the small scale units are into low cost generics. And and there are a lot of complications associated with quality and the small scale. We'll go into it when we talk about the market failures.
Yeah, the recent controversy around the quality of the cough syrups or whatever it is, all of those will come into that particular thing. Yeah, but
Absolutely,
yeah,
not just the cough syrups. There are more than what it meets the
that's just
more than
the
what
tip of
meets
the
the yes,
iceberg.
absolutely. Yet there are also structural challenges in this particular industry, right? So one of the things that hit us was the uh, humongous amount of import dependence. About 85 to 90% of raw materials, and primarily in the pharma industry, there are two kinds of raw materials that you need. One is called the API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredient, which is a core part of the medicine, so to say, the molecule. And then the other is key starter materials. right? Which are catalysts, and then you make up the whole, you put in excipients, etc., and then you make up the whole drug. So, I mean, none of us here are technical, but in that sense, we should know that there are APIs and KSMs which make up for the raw materials, and about 85 to 90%, staggering amount, comes from China, a single country. And there's a reason for it. There's something historically China did to make that happen. Not just us, the world is dependent on China for raw materials, and that even played out during COVID. We had paracetamol shortages, etc., which happened, which primarily because even for something as basic as paracetamol, the API comes from China. So be that as it may, so that was one big structural challenge. The second is, of course, we have a very complex regulatory setup, which we'll talk about in detail. There are standards control, but there are multiple agencies, both at the union as well as at the state level, working on this. So that's also kind of complex. There are also some current challenges in terms of performance. One is, of course, the quality concerns that you just raised in terms of, cough syrups and cough syrup contamination, and there are also infection-inducing eye drops which were unearthed in Africa, and that came from Indian pharma. So there were a lot of recalls, bans, etc., also happening, not just by us but also by US FDA on Indian pharma produce. So the exports has been kind of tapering. It's very modest at about 3%. We've also seen a kind of stagnation in R&D expenses as well as R&D investments in this particular sector. We had to dig deep, and a lot of our answers were from the analysis of government intervention and market failures, etc. And before Deepali lists out the market failures, what I would like, and the government areas, what I would like to place here is the unique fact is that in the pharma industry, just for this, the point that you had mentioned, Suman, at the outset, which is about affordable access to medicine, there is a lot of government intervention for that. And what happens is, actually, the government interventions have been counterproductive in the pharma industry and been resulting in market failures, which is what I think we will dig deeper and talk about, which has led to all these challenges that I just listed down.
So the specific need for government intervention came because there is a market failure. There are specific market failures within the pharma sector. So what are these market failures, and how has the government actually dealt with it is what I would like to know from your analysis.
Yeah, so first of all, I would really like to point out the market failures that exist. So, one is information asymmetry. So, this issue revolves around the information imbalance in between the consumers who consume the medicines and the producers, that are the pharmaceutical companies. Because generally, what happens is that the consumers do not have equal access to information about the quality of medicines that are being produced.
Yeah.
So here comes the information asymmetry issue. Another is the negative externality that we have pointed out. So this issue comes from the cost and the benefit of the research and development in the pharmaceutical industry. They are not aligned with each other. So the reduction in the research and development standing, this is negatively impacting the development of new medicines, as well as it hinders the potential advancement in the healthcare sector. The last one is the principal agent problem. So what
That's
comes
more
here
of
is,
government failure. Yeah, go on.
yeah, so there is a disconnect between the goals of the principal, which is the government, and the actions of the agent, that are the pharmaceutical companies. Here the government expects the pharmaceutical industry to prioritize the domestic APIs, but what generally happens is, because of the various factors like cost efficiency or regulatory constraints, the pharmaceutical companies might, they opt for importing APIs instead of producing them domestically.
Which is not bad if it gives us a cost advantage and therefore reduces cost for the end customer. But yeah, the incentive structures the between the government and the manufacturers themselves don't seem to be aligned, and therefore it is leading to the mismatch in terms of either quality or in terms of pricing, etc. Is that what
Yeah, I'll kind of dig deeper one by one, because Dipali had listed three big areas where the government interventions are, which is about price controls and quality, which you had just mentioned. Second is quality, and the third is about investment and export promotion. So let me get into price controls, because that is quite like the mother of all issues, so to say, in the pharma industry. What is the reason for price control? I mean, let's start with that. The rationale is that, uh, you know, most governments resort to price controls to kind of save consumers, save within inverted commas, from excessive pricing and profiteering, so to say, by the companies. And there is also this, factor that drugs are essential for the health of society, and therefore it's an essential commodity. And that's the rationale with which many governments do price controls. Now, here is a case in India where this price control, whole price control policy has gone beyond control by itself. So we have price ceilings fixed for about 906 drug formulations. And we also have retail prices, not only just drug prices, but the government also specifies what could be the retail price for about 2,400 plus medicines and trade margins. So they actually, they actually figure out what should be the retail price, what should be the retailer margin, and therefore what should be the distributor the trade margins, and they rationalize it for a lot of medicines. Now that's a lot of intervention, a lot of deep intervention by the government, and they have very complex, formulations and basis to decide this. They call it the principles of pharmacoeconomics, and they kind of figure out a complex mechanism which is widely disputed even within the pharmaceutical industry. There's a lot of representations that the industry makes to the government, etc. Now, this happens through the drug price control order, which the NPPA, the National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, from time to time kind of releases this, publishes this DPCO. Now, what happens is, and the rationale, as you had mentioned, it's about the out of pocket expenses, as well as the fact that pharmaceuticals have to be, kind of accessible. Now, what happens is that this has gone beyond, a kind of a control because of the number of drugs that are kind of regulated due to this. For example, what constitutes an essential medicine? As per WHO, is about 414, but we have drug price controls for 906 drug formulations and 2,400 plus medicines, etc. So that results in a number of counterproductive, outcomes in the industry. Let's start with what happens to the pharmaceutical companies itself. I talked about the market structure, right? So there were like 24 large companies, and then there were lots of small companies. Now, if you have drug price control, then, and that too by the market pricing method, because they have a complex, formula which says that market share and whoever has the highest market share, and what is the average price of that particular drug, sold by that particular manufacturer, and therefore the drug price ceiling is fixed as per that. So what happens is there are a number of smaller manufacturers for whom these put a lot of margin pressures, and they create very high entry barriers. So smaller manufacturers actually go out of business. There are, there are lots of producer exits that happen because of this particular price control. The second thing that happens is that even bigger pharma companies, we talked about R&D expenses being low, R&D investment being low. There was no incentive, as you mentioned. The incentive structures for pharma companies has become in such a way, because of the drug price control, that large companies have stalled work on antibiotics, on on a lot of drug research because of this. And how does it affect the consumers? We have very few new drugs coming out of Indian pharma companies. What used to be a triple digit figure New drug approvals by CDSCO, we'll talk about CDSCO, the Drug Standards Organization, stands at a meager 26 drugs per annum for the last 6 years. And that's like abysmally low innovation. So innovation is hit even by the large companies. Low cost manufacturers go out of business, and the unintended consequences of that is that only high income patient populations are able to get
Afford.
benefits. So these are some of the unintended consequences, and these are some of the counterproductive outcomes that happen due to price controls.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. We'll need to go a little bit more into detail about the other issues with this. Before that, we'll take a short break at this point. To our listeners, if you are interested, and if this working of the markets, government, society interests you, we'd like you to go over to our website and check out our courses. You can study this in a lot more detail. The applications for our graduate certificate in public policy program are open. And so you can go to school.takshashila.org.in and check out our courses and apply for whichever one that interests you. At this point, we'll take a short break and we'll come back to hear more about this.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
Okay, welcome back. And we're talking about the pharma sector and the issues of the pharmaceutical sector within India. And Deepali and Kannan are enlightening us with the research that they have done. We have spoken about price controls. We'll move on to the next one. Deepali.
So moving ahead to the quality standard regulatory systems, I would like to specifically say, like in the world of medicines, keeping them safe and effective is super important. But there is a whole bunch of rules and checks behind the scenes that make sure that everything is okay. The CDSCO acts here like the guardian. They check and approve medicines, they keep an eye on how they are made, and they set the rules for their quality. Now, CDSCO, which is the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, works with the DCGI, that is the Drug Controller General of India, plus a few other groups. And surprise, each state government has its own set of people checking the medicines too. So the rationale behind picking this point is like there are negative externalities that exist. And to mitigate those negative externalities that arise from substandard drugs, the government has instituted the quality regulations to ensure that the pharmaceuticals meet
I just
safety
want to
standards.
point out. I just want to point out you're using the word externalities generally. Externalities. This is more of a quality problem. Okay, externalities has a specific meaning. I mean, specific definition. We'll talk about it later. Yeah, go ahead.
The regulatory authorities, they inspect, they recall if needed, and keep a close watch on the market. So people call auditor visit the places where medicines are made, and they make sure that they follow up the super important WHO standards. But why all these checks? It is to make sure that no bad medicines sneak in. But even with all these checkings, there are some challenges. Like you see, the system is pretty much complicated. It's spread across 37 different agencies, both at national and state level. But here is the tricky part, like the CDSCO does not have the strong legal support to be the main rule maker. And they also rely on a junior DCGI and these groups that make a bit like messy sometimes. Another thing is that these agencies don't always share information well. Like this makes it tough to keep a close watch. Plus, there are some smaller companies that might make not so great medicines because the rules for them are not as strict. And if I specifically talk about the impact and consequences caused by all this, like everyone gets affected in the medical world. Companies might lose their good name in the export market because of bad medicines. And sometimes they might even share wrong data because of these tricky rules of quality adherence. And for us, the
Yeah.
people who consume these medicines, it is a bit scary because it can have some severe outcomes. Sometimes those fake medicines might slip through, especially in the other countries where they are being picked up for the export
Yeah.
market. So this is sure that these rules have helped, make medicine safer, but there is still a long way to go. And making sure like that the rules are followed well and keeping things simple and transparent, I think this is the basic key for that.
True. Thanks, Deepali. Would so having analyzed the sector with all the issues that they present, etc., what are some of your recommendations? What are some policy, uh, what are some policy imperatives for all of us? Have you thought about this? What could be some solutions around this?
So, the biggest problem in this particular sector is that there is a notion that healthcare access is the burden of the pharma industry, while in reality, public healthcare access, which is different from healthcare or pharma, is actually public healthcare is the burden of the government and not the pharma industry, and which is important to understand, because yes, there is a public healthcare issue in India, which Dipali will talk about. But it is important to understand that pharmaceuticals, by economic logic, are private goods, and businesses are in the pursuit of profit, and rightfully so. So, therefore, public healthcare is not something that the pharma industry is chasing, but they're enablers, because they're in the pursuit of profit. So, if Dipali, you could take us through about the healthcare access and affordability issue in
A
India.
lot of times we get confused between public health and healthcare. Right? It is important to draw that distinction itself in the first place. So, yeah, Deepali, go ahead and talk about public health that you've been studying and working on.
Yeah. So you see that healthcare access and affordability in India, basically, it's a real issue. And guess like who should shoulder that burden? Exactly, like people say, it's government. And if we talk based on the facts, then I would like to say that about two-thirds of the population here does not have any medical insurance. That's a lot, right?
Yeah. But again,
And
insurance
what
is a private. Oh,
yeah, and but what's our spending on healthcare? It's just around 1% of the GDP. Like it's way low compared to other big developing countries. And when it comes to shelling out for healthcare, like a whopping 60% of that burden falls on medicines, like making up about
yeah.
two-thirds of what we spend on healthcare. And it's not just about the money. Like we have got like infrastructure problems, especially in our primary healthcare systems. But there are some states also like Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan. They have found a way around this by centralizing the drug procurement, making essential medicines available, and also at reasonable prices. But here is the kicker: like pharmaceuticals, they're businesses, right? And logically, they're out of profit as well. And the twist comes here: like focusing on patient outcomes, it leads to more profits in the long run. And markets are supposed to keep the prices in check, but here is where things get interesting, because it's like a game of principal agent, as I mentioned earlier, where government is trying to take the role of a boss. So in the healthcare system, what I would say is the government might be seen as the boss, but when it comes to the pharma industry, it's more like the government playing the supporting role, helping the sector grow.
Should actually that is the should be
Yeah.
the aspiration.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of the moot issue, because that's kind of the mother issue, because that's what gets translated into things like price controls, and then that will have a cascading effect on quality. And even if good intent and good quality standards exist, implementation is a very big lacuna, very big gap area. And there are people who have worked, there are people who have done some excellent work on this in the recent past to unearth these kind of issues in quality, which is, Dinesh Thakur comes to my mind. A lot of work around quality, and a lot of work around whistleblowing about quality standards being flouted, etc., has been done by Dinesh Thakur. That's interesting reading, as well as on drug price controls by Amanullah Khan. So there's quite a lot of work happening in this particular industry to kind of change the outlook, and that's if the policy focus shifts, as Deepali just mentioned. with respect to pharma industry, the government should view itself as an agent and not the principal. Well, public healthcare is different from pharma, where the government might be a principal, but here it is different, and that is what has resulted in a lot of failures not being addressed at all.
Sure. Yeah, I think you've given us a great overview of the entire sector and particular issues and the role of the government in the pharma sector itself. Thank you so much for this. If there are any other closing comments at this point, go ahead and make it, either of you.
No, I just would like to leave 3-4 big areas on the table. I mean, in terms of what should the government ideally do in terms of proposals and things like that. What we advocate, and however tough politically it is, in a phased manner, we advocate that all drug price controls must go. That's the only way to address a lot of failures in this market. And further government intervention will only be more counterproductive. That's what's happened, or that's what's played out before. The second thing is that we need to have a single central regulator with statutory status, quite like the FSSAI or TRI, etc. That's what CDCO must have. So we need to build more teeth into that. We need to create a central database, quite like
regulation
the
needs to be.
it needs to be tightened, and there needs to be more monitoring and surveillance to avoid all the quality issues that we just spoke about. And lastly, and I think that's obviously a policy measure to say that how do we make FDI happen we free up FDI controls, because this is not a national security sector. So the automatic route must be available for all FDI and R&D, both brownfield and greenfield, which is not the case right now. API manufacturing. One of the reasons that I touched early upon in my talk about China leading API. I mean, we are trying to give PLIs for API manufacturing, which is okay, but it's not going to solve the problem. API manufacturing requires a large infrastructure with large effluent treatment plants, and because there is a fermentation process through which API is manufactured, and that requires to be addressed with effluent treatment plants and manufacturing parks, etc., which China did in almost the late 80s. And today they are where they are. And that's something that we need to invest into, rather than just giving PLIs, which will subsidize, so to say, imports for APIs. The other way to look at it is to kind of kickstart R&D investments. It might be worth it to actually look at RLIs, which is R&D investment linked incentives, rather than PLIs, to kind of trigger innovation and making of specialized drugs. And of course, the healthcare access that Deepali talked about, that problem is very important to address, because that's why the government is all over the place, is what we feel. And for that to be solved, we need to institute a large-scale public health insurance cover, which I think Ayushman Bharat tries to do, but I think it needs to be further strengthened and widened, with, of course, central and state procurement.
Yeah, again, Ayushman Bharat is a curative thing. We need to go back a few steps, get our preventive healthcare also in place, get nutrition, get all those things in place to actually get a good public health, or just improve health standards of people in our country, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thank you. Deepali, you have something?
No. Kannan has ended it well.
Okay. Thank you both. Thank you for being on this show. And I hope you will come back with more analysis on different sectors, or if you want to go detail into the same sector, and come back with more insights for us and our listeners. Thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners who are listening, and we'll be back with another show soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST, or our website takshashila.org.in.